If you saw someone throw down $2,000 on the floor of a trade show, challenging anyone walking by to win it, would that make you stop and take notice? Of course, don't lie. This is the world of infotainment, of magic, but more importantly, influencer and crowd psychology, creating booth buzz, conveying technical messaging, and collecting leads. This is episode 96 of Great Things with Great Tech with Anders Boulanger, CEO and founder of Engagify. So come on, I know you want what I'm selling. You just don't even know it yet. Hey Anders, welcome to Great Things with Great Tech. It's great to have you on. I've wanted to have you on for a long time. Great to have you, but just give us a bit of an overview of yourself, what you do, and a little bit about Engagify, and then we'll dig into how you became this master of the public event and the crowd at trade shows.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, thanks for having me on. By the way, this is great connecting because we've seen each other over the years, and to kind of interact on a podcast is great. Yeah, my company Engagify, we usually say we create engagement at events such as trade shows, or we train your teams to be more engaging. So we're on a mission to rehumanize business through engagement. And so this includes gathering big crowds of people around a trade show booth, communicating a message passionately, finding qualified leads, and ultimately, generating pipeline and sales for companies at trade shows is kind of where that comes from. But my background is that I'm a magician, so that actually came first, and then trade shows and the performance skills kind of enhanced what we do at trade shows, and it became a business, and Veeam Software's been a client for a long time. So
absolutely. In fact, I think I met you before I started at Veeam. I've got memories of very early VM worlds, maybe I want to say 2012, 2013, all that time ago when, and there's pictures, I've got pictures of I can find me in a crowd of literally probably 300 or 400 people with you in the center, herding the crowd in, doing a trick to basically grab people's attention on the booth. So we go back a long time, and then obviously through tons, whether it be VM worlds, whether it be reinvents and other bits, we've crossed over a lot. And this is why I wanted to get you on, because people might be asking, why am I getting a magician who's doing engagement on the show? Yeah.
And I was going to say, we technically call ourselves infotainers. And so just to kind of put a point on that is that when you say to a company, hey, we're going to bring in a magician, what pops to mind? Like guy with a top hat and pulling a rabbit out of a hat, like cheesy magician kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so, what we've done is we call it infotainer. We get to kind of define it then, the company's mission critical information that they want communicated, done in an entertaining way. Right. And so that's where the engagement comes from, the entertainment side of things. So I just like to put that out there just because, it can kind of in their minds, maybe go to a place where we don't want to go. But once you see it and experience it, and you hear that the messaging's on point and the effects or the magic is a visual metaphor to be able to hang that messaging on so that people remember it and experience it.
Yeah, and just to sort of explain that further from my perspective, I was actually blown away with the way that you are able to bind together the magic, the engagement, but you clearly do your research on the customers and the vendors as well. Like Veeam back to front. Like you could sell it, you could you could do something like that because you actually have that knowledge to be able to be effective in that role. Like it has to be something that you and your team are kind of into, right? So that's the technology aspect of it for me as well, and that's the link, which is really interesting. So magician, let's say magic, right? Like take us back to young Anders. Like what started that interest in magic before we get into the infotainment perspective?
Sure. So back in like 1982. There was a Fisher Price magic set, like a toy magic set. I have it downstairs, in my office here. But I got that. I was 5 years old. I started my first magic trick for non-family was show and tell at kindergarten. And it was such a hit that I kept getting more and more magic kits and magic books for Christmas and for my birthday. And so when I got to be about 12, I actually, with pencil crayon, made a poster that I put up in the post office in my little town of 500 people, Wawanesa, Manitoba, Canada, and got 3 gigs that year, right? And I charged $5 for a half an hour for a half an hour
Wow.
show. And they were all the same kids. So it's like, it was my best friend's little brother's birthday,
Yep.
and then it was his buddy's birthday. And so I had to kept changing my show because the kids were catching on, right? It was the same kids.
But
at
you're
all the events.
12. You're 12 at this point, and you're charging for
Yeah.
shows. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So yeah, it wasn't much, but it was like, I was thrilled to be
more than I was
doing it,
making.
right? Yeah, yeah. So then, I got a little bit older, starting doing some fairs and festivals. When I was probably like 14 or 15, I got a business card. I was like really, felt awesome having a business card. Then I went to university. I got a 4-year physics degree, a Bachelor of Science.
Okay.
So that was my kind of like, don't run away to the circus kind of thing, like our backup plan kind of thing happening, that my parents kind of insisted on.
Yeah.
But that was good. It was a time where I was able to kind of build my business and, just, have fun, but also just get doing more and more shows. At that time, I started wearing a suit. And so I kind of went a little bit more corporate. So it was kind of almost the same magic, but with a bit of different twist and new promo pictures, and made it look a little more mature. And then eventually I did a few trade shows. Actually, in university, I did my first trade show. And when I went to the, it was an agricultural show, and I went to the Cargill booth. And in that booth, there was a ventriloquist, and he was just killing it. And I asked him, how he got started. And he actually had gotten the gig from a man named Joel Bauer. And I, at the time, was reading a book on trade shows by Joel Bauer.
Wow.
And so he was kind of the top trade show magician at that time, and or almost ever in a sense. Years later, I got to train with him with 29 other magicians about how to learn trade shows. So that's when I got trained by Joel. That's when I started going, like how do we take the cheese out of the magic part, make it a high passion, message driven presentation that takes people from, point A, where they're experiencing the pain points, to point B, where they have the solution and they have the benefits. But there's this aha moment in the middle where the magic effect happens, but also where you introduce the company's, solution and benefits, so that they go, that moment where people discover, that what the company does, and that sweet, or that secret sauce, if you will, that's what we want to lock into their minds. And so, and the more I would learn about it, the more fascinated it became, because, you're using magic to create a peak experience where we're creating curiosity and wonder in the minds of the people watching, which is a very, very powerful state for selling.
Yeah.
Right?
And at a moment where there's 1,000 other distractions going on in a trade show, people's minds are everywhere. They're looking forward to going out and, having a drink and networking. And generally people don't come to trade show to work, but they understand that this is part of the process. And it was interesting that you talked about that, what I would call that aha moment that you do so well. And now that I think about what you just said, you do manage to marry both the magic and the aha of the product together at that same time. And it almost becomes like an explosion at that one point. And I've seen people's faces as you get to that point just go, whoa, like, whoa. I've seen them just literally lose their mind, lose their shit, if I can say that, because the magic's awesome. But then they also realize that you've tied in a product pitch as well, or the message for the vendor. So, and in their mind, they're going, how did I get myself to this point? I'm here and I'm listening to it, and, it's worked. Bam, so it's great having seen that. And I think people really only more understand it if they do actually see it live. And, like you've probably you would have lost count because you can't count. You've probably performed in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, right? Like maybe even millions, like just over the time, right?
I don't even, I haven't even tried to calculate that. It's more, we do think about kind of the leads we generate in a day, because we do track a lot of that for our companies that we work with. We have what we call an impact report, where historically If a company brings us in and they haven't had us before, typically there's like a 54% lead increase because of our impact on the booth and what we can do. So we apply that. And so we track that sort of thing. But cumulatively over the years, I have not actually ran those numbers. So
Yeah.
that would be interesting.
Probably significant. So yeah, so take us back to Engagify, and obviously you trained, and then were you doing this on your own at this point, or did you start the company yourself and then grew from there? Like, how did Engagify start out?
Right. So I had kind of a company. It was called Anders Magic at one point, and that was where I was doing mostly corporate events, conferences, that sort of thing, and then the odd trade show. And my first big American client was Veeam Software back in 2011. And so I came down and did that show, and then the VP of worldwide marketing at that point, Carrie Reber, she was bringing me in, and then eventually moved to another company. And she says, I know we can't get you because Veeam's, got you. Do you have someone else? And so when I trained with my mentor, there were some other guys that were on the same page, like they understand the system, right? And so Shakuma Avery was we brought in, and he worked for that company. And then what happened is I was watching one of his shows, and I saw a woman who looked like an event manager. I can just spot them now.
Yep.
And she said, this guy's amazing. And he said, yeah, he's working for my company. Who do you work for? And she worked for Fortinet, and we still work with Fortinet to this day. So it's like, it's just amazing how, you get seen, people see it's effective. And then, and it's great at a trade show because all the other booths are potential customers. So they see it working. And so that's where that company was originally called the Infotainer, meaning me. And then here's my brilliant rebranding when I started doing more and more and selling other, having other infotainers. I just added an S, so as the Infotainers. So we were quite busy for a long time, and then something happened in 2020, of course, and the events shut down, and we were on the tip of the spear of that. We saw that coming because it was just happening right away. And in fact, just I think yesterday, a memory came up on the last trade show I worked in that year, and it was a ghost town, right? You're walking around, and it was just such a weird feeling.
It would line up 5 years, crazy.
Yeah. And so during that time, we were always so busy that we didn't rebrand, but we had a marketing consultancy come in and say, you know what, the Infotainers is so much about, hey, look what we do, right? This kind of like, it's about us. But it's like, how can we make it more about just creating engagement for companies? Because business needs this, right? Especially tech, right? And I mean, you get this completely, Anthony, in the way that like, we get all this complexity and we get all these acronyms and we get all this curse of knowledge happening, right? We have to simplify to make things more engaging so that people can consume it, right? So that's partly why we work in tech a lot, because we're able to come in, even though we've been doing it a long time, we come in as still outsiders, and we need to, I'm going to say the term, dumb it down for us. But then if we're able to then communicate it, people can relate to it, right? And that's kind of where we were. So in that time, because we had some time, we shifted to doing virtual engagement trainings. So selling over Zoom, doing webinars, that sort of thing, and training teams that way. And we rebranded to Engagify, which has a better feel to it. It sounds like it's
kind of it's a modern tech name, isn't it? Like,
yeah. And at the same time, it's kind of like now we're having this ability to engagify, events and teams, right? It's kind of a verb in a sense. So that's how that came about.
I'm actually quite surprised that it was still around and available when, like, looking back retrospectively, right? Well, it's kind of obvious.
We got Engagify.ai, and we also have .ca, but the AI was kind of like, and of course you're talking on this podcast about AI a lot these days. The twist we put on it does sound nice, Engagify.ai. It kind of rhymes. But the AI that we talk about this a lot is our AI is for authentic interactions.
Nice.
That's our little twist on it. And it's like, I'm not anti-AI. I'm just saying the more AI comes about, the more we have to lean into our humanness. And that's really what we're about.
That's great. Authentic. Yeah, I love that. It's amazing. So exhibitor training consultant, virtual training, engagement specialist, and then I guess the crux of that as well is that Engagify effectively trains people to be better at engaging themselves in their own businesses and their own communities and whatever they're doing right as well. So do you also offer sort of a I'm not is it group or is it one-to-one training for individuals to be better in themselves to do and speak
We
and engage?
Yeah, for sure. So we will do often group, which is probably the most common.
Hmm.
But we also do have on-demand training, so people can train on their own, in their own time, in that sense. We don't really do too much one-on-one training.
Yep.
Special circumstances, sometimes we do that,
Yeah.
but often it is, a group training, or whether it's in person or virtually. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about trade shows because they're obviously everyone's gone to a trade show in their life. If you work in tech, you go. Like whether you're a vendor or whether you're a customer or a partner, you're just going to go to them. And I think have the question I'll ask later on is where are they at the moment? But maybe we'll leave it to last. But I think what's really interesting in terms of the booth, right? Like I know when I was younger, not so much now, but I think maybe I've gone to so many and I'm on the other side of it that you kind of it's not the same experience anymore, right? But when I was younger going to these things, my first thing is let's look at what freebies I can get. Become a bit of a tight ass. I love a free gift. Awesome. Which obviously, as you see, lots of people are in the same boat. They just might not admit it. But we love a free gift, right? So you'd go, you'd scour, you'd get the certain gift, and whether it be whatever it is, right? But the point is that gift is designed as a dopamine hit for yourself to feel good at that time about getting a new gift or getting something for free. And then at that moment, I guess the idea is that you then associate that with the brand that's giving away the gift, right? Like, is that the general sort of,
Yeah.
why these freebies are in existence at these trade shows?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back way back, right? They used to call them premiums or promotional items, right? And then they sometimes get a bad rap. People call it trinkets and trash, or
Hmm.
nowadays swag is the term, right? I like to
Swag,
call them
swag.
gifts, just in the sense that gift has a greater sense of, like, that has more power to it, right? As opposed, and the more we give it importance, I think the better it works, right? That
Yeah,
we make it special. If we treat it like trash, no one will value it, right?
yeah.
But you're right, it is about spiking dopamine, and a lot of engagement, a lot of trade shows, it is about creating something that people want, that sense of reward, that sense of a novelty, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of these a lot of
Yeah,
these
they are.
giveaways
Yeah.
are considered novelties in a sense, right? So I don't see that going away. And in some ways, I sometimes almost feel sad for humanity because it works so well. Like, I just got back from a show that was called Expo West, and it's a natural products expo. A lot of
Okay.
people, it was in Anaheim last week. That show is all about samples, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's samples of some food product, samples of some lotion, of some,
Yeah.
laundry detergent, whatever it is. But people have such a gimme sense of entitlement at that show that I almost was like disgusted by it, which, I mean, I work in trade shows all the time and I know these things work, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like, ugh. So, I mean, we see it at tech shows, and there is some of this, entitlement of, like, hey, I want this, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
if that exists, you know, harnessing that is in your best interest as an exhibitor, right? So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's built into our wiring. So, let's not fight it.
No.
Just use it to its best effect.
And the reality is, as companies like Veeam, yeah, and others become known for their giveaways, get known for their swag. Like Vendor X has the best swag. We always
Yeah.
go there, and that stuff just builds and builds and becomes legendary. So the next year, that if you're going to go to a trade show, who are you going to hit first? Where are you going to hit the Veeam stand or the X, or Vendor X? It is actually a thing. So we know that, and especially as if you're on the other side of the vendor show, you know where you want to go to get the good stuff because the good stuff is
Yeah.
from Veeam. And then you make the pattern match, and if you're trying to win the technical decision maker, and especially in tech trade shows, you're halfway there. If you've got a, I'm trying to see if I've actually got a Veeam situation on my desk. I've got one, but I'm not going to show that one. But you've got them around, right? Still from maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The spinners were. Oh, here's one.
Yeah.
Here we go. like
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
like a little ball, which I still use
Yeah,
all the time. And
yeah,
for me, it's, I don't actually notice what's on there, but I use the ball all the time. But for
yeah,
someone
yeah,
else who's maybe looking to buy a backup, maybe they'll be playing with this one day and go, "Oh yeah, there you go. Let's have a chat to someone."
yeah.
That's what it can do. Um, so what you do though is different, right? So explain what you do though for the vendor to get those leads, to
Sure.
get value and drive
So
engagement at the booth.
yeah, so if we typically do 5 presentations a day during the 5 busiest hours, kind of thing is how it works. And if I were to kind of slow it down and just look at how this works, I've got a little stage, I have a sound system, so I'm wearing a microphone. I often start by throwing down $2,000 on the floor and say that someone's going to have a shot at winning my money. And invariably that will stop someone usually, and they will stand there and I'll do
Is that real
a
money, by
magic
the
of,
way?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I've lost it
Wow,
in the Veeam booth before. So that's
wow.
another story, but
I
we
didn't.
can,
I didn't take it, but yeah.
no, it wasn't you. No, someone won it off me. But what I was going to say is that I do a magic effect where I cut a deck of cards using the shadow of my hand and I flick out the card that someone just chose. And so that is such eye candy. That is such a unique effect. It's more of a closing effect, but I open with it,
Yeah.
that it will gather this crowd of people. I then will stand up, and then I have something where they all connect with each other and I make them fist bump each other. And then there's another
Okay.
effect that happens.
Yeah.
I have like kind of a tarp, like this round, it's a reflector for photography, but it's one of these wire things that you can kind of loop and make it small and it pops open. That's my table. I make them hang on to the table, and then I do an effect on this table. So I'm gradually making it higher and higher. So if you just stop and you think, and you saw a man kneeling in the aisle with $2,000 on the floor, there's this kind of, what the hell's going on here kind of
Yeah.
moment, right? That pattern interrupt of your normal day at a trade show. So that happens, that captures your attention. I'm not talking about the company at all. If I was working for Veeam, I wouldn't have even said anything about Veeam yet. And then I would get on my stage. So now I'm getting up higher, and it's about 20, 21 inches. So now I'm up above everyone so that more people can see me. And when I get on stage, I say I get on page, meaning now I'm going to bring in the scripting, the message integration.
Okay.
So now we start doing stuff and we're talking about Veeam, and they get that that's why I'm there, right? Like they understand that.
They know it now.
Right. But my goal at that point is to co-create an event with them. And I'll even say that to them, saying it's not me doing it for you, it's us doing it for each other. Who wants to have a good time? Say yeah. And that is the buy-in moment where they go, yeah, like, and then I'm like, all right, let's go. Like I'm going to unleash the storm now, right? So then we start and we get into all the, the different effects that talk about the value proposition and everything we want to get across. At the end, we're going to pick someone that has a chance to win some money. Okay. And then they play a game that I'm really good at. The odds are stacked in their favor, but I'm really good at the game. And so we'll do that. And at the end, it has this like kind of cathartic release where we then go get gifts and I bring people in to go see a demo. And there is usually a qualification process too, right before I pick that person. There is a fun moment that I would do with Veeam at shows where you have very good, penetration into that crowd, where I could be like, Veeam customers, raise your hand. And all these hands shoot up. Look to your left, look to your right, fund someone with their hand down, elbow them in the ribs and say, get it, it just works, right? And it would get this big laugh.
Yeah, I remember you doing
right?
that. Yep, awesome.
Yeah. And, but then, the idea is, hey, answer me loud, answer me clear. Is it simple and does it work? And you get this resounding, yeah. Now, I can't do that with most companies because you just don't have that love of the product. You just don't have that kind of penetration. But then I say, hey, it doesn't matter what we say about ourselves. It's what our customers say. How many people would agree? Right. So now I'm basically making a case to take a closer look. Right. And then I'll say, if we can help you save you time, save you money, give you greater peace of mind, how many people would be willing to see a 3-minute demo? Raise your hand. Wow. And then I'm trying to obligate these people to publicly commit to watching a demo. Yeah. And then I'm going to lead those people over to the demo station where we can do a mass demo. And is it 3 minutes long? If they stay for 3 minutes, that's great. If they're very interested, they'll stay a lot longer. but they will self-select at that point. And so the idea of can we take this person through these first few steps of the customer buying journey?
Yeah.
That's my goal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a demo or generally a booth presentation as well, right? Like
Hmm.
it could be a booth preso where I've done it where where I've had no one literally, and then after you've done your thing, I'll have 50, 100, 200 people around the booth, right? So that's kind of the power of it as well in terms of just if there's no one there at the start, if you're there, I'm almost guaranteed that there's going to be people by the time I'm starting, right? That's the power of it as well. So that's really cool. So that's that side of it. So I guess let's finish on the trade shows, and then I want to get on to speaking and confidence and engagement at that point. So where do you see trade shows going? Because obviously for a while there was at Microsoft that said they weren't going to do any other trade shows, and all of a sudden they brought it back last year. And there's a bit of an element of doubt in terms of the spend versus the return on investment at these things these days. And I guess at a certain extent as well, there's a little bit of what's the word? I don't want to say wokeness or political correctness that comes into play. I feel anyway at these things where the overall stigma of these shows is that they're a junket, right? Overall, and we kind of understand that, yeah, companies will spend money to bring people in to clip the tickets and get the follow-ups and get the leads, right? How important are they in today's changing world? A loaded question, but
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, I
interested.
do remember, during the pandemic that there was all this travel happening, and yet there was some companies doing quite well, like shooting the lights out just with
Mm,
virtual meetings and all this. And you kind of go, are these events required, right?
yeah.
Of course, events came back big,
Yep.
and people needed that connection, right? There is always an element of trust that is involved in buying something, and being in person, breathing the same air, rubbing shoulders with that person is going to drive trust a lot further, a lot faster than virtual will ever do, right? And with virtual backgrounds, and I'm pointing behind me, I have a real background, but I'm just saying, the level of artificiality, if you will, in the world today with AI, with all of these things, people are craving authenticity. And
Yeah.
that's where events can deliver that, right? Get in front of people. Now, you just mentioned it's getting cost prohibitive to actually go to some of these shows. Like I see a lot of the inside of the companies and the budgets and what they're spending, and it's highway robbery what some of these events are doing. And I just waiting for the pushback to start happening where people say, forget it, I'm not coming, and big companies pulling out where,
Yeah.
the organizers have to go, ooh, we went a little too far, right? I
Yep.
mean, reInvent year over year cranked up their exhibiting fees like 20, 25% or something like that. Like who budgets for that much of an increase, right?
Yeah.
You
And
know?
it ain't 25% of a small amount, by the way. It's 25% of a
No,
big amount.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
right. That's right. So that's where, I mean, I'm biased because I work at events. I want events to continue. But at the same time, I feel like there is going to be a bit of a pullback or a shrinking maybe of presence of some companies just because it's getting out of hand, in my opinion.
Do you also think that it's a cyclical thing where a number of companies will rise up together in a particular industry, right? We saw it in cloud and virtualization, backup. There's these little pods of companies that basically create the ecosystem, and it's only when a company creates an ecosystem that I think you can get a really big trade show that company can then execute on. VMware huge in it, AWS were huge in it. Veeam isn't a big show, but it still gets quite a bit of people there, and all of those contemporaries. But is it a possibility that we're just waiting for a bit of a flush out of the current status quo, and there'll be a couple of new companies that pop up, and all of a sudden they'll see value in what you just said, which is face-to-face networking, breathing the same air, because you can get old and stale maybe as well. So do we need some fresh air to come in and just go, hey, new ideas, new companies, they haven't experienced this, they need to experience it because they've got to grow in the same way. They're not going to grow without face-to-face and that human touch.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if something comes along that is the new, tech du jour kind of thing happening,
Yeah.
and everyone wants to be a part of that, they're going to flock to it, and that will be the next big thing, and it might take the shine off some of these other shows because it's just maybe becoming old news or what have you. But that cyclical thing, I think, will continue to play out time and time
Yeah.
again. I imagine.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to touch on engagement, public speaking, because it's obviously something you're great at. And, you're obviously there telling people how to be better engagers themselves when they're talking to their own contemporaries. So how do you work with that? Because I know that in myself, like I'm confident in front of people. I've spoken in front of lots of people before, done it a lot now, I've lost count. I still get very nervous, right? And I still sometimes can get so nervous that I work myself up quite a bit, right? Depending on the situation, whatever it might be. I even had, I'll be honest with you, once properly had a panic attack on stage. It was crazy. It came from nowhere. And I was really surprised at myself because I'd been doing this for years. Everyone had told me how great I was at public speaking and how I was a natural, and I just kind of it connected. But I still got very nervous on my inside. So that's a bit of insecurity. But the fact that I let myself sort of spin out into this this flight response, which created the panic attack, which meant that I recognized what was happening, so I didn't faint on stage. I've never fainted on stage, so that's a joke that we always use, right? Like, if the demo's gone wrong, if I faint, just move me to the back of the stage. But I realized what was happening. I pulled myself off, got myself together, came back. Um, why do you think? Why do you think confident public speakers still have that sort of self doubt? Because I know lots of people still get riled up and kind of worried by public speaking. It is our greatest fear, isn't it?
Yeah, they say the number one fear is fear of public speaking. Number two is death, right? So we fear it more than death, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
And I think, there is a bit of that imposter syndrome in everything we do, right? No matter where we're at. And so, I've been doing this a long time, but I walk into a trade show and sometimes I go like, oh, this, like if it's a bad booth setup or something, I'll be like, am I going to be able to get the crowds here? Like I question myself even after this many years, right? So I think that's natural. I know a Hall of Fame speaker who is just amazing and he still has imposter syndrome, right?
Wow.
So it's kind of like, maybe it's reassuring that everyone still gets that, right? Like that we have that. And so sometimes if we run that in our heads a little too much, that can kind of, possibly spin into something.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of I think they call it the chain of being, but this idea that, your breathing can control your state and your state can control your thoughts and this whole thing. So, if you're listening to this and you have a thing coming up, deep breaths, right? We don't want to go into this, like you said, flight or fight response. We want to come back into, the more relaxed state, and that's kind of if you have anything you can do to ground yourself or center yourself. I'm a big believer in, kind of pre-show rituals, right?
Yep.
You probably have something, Anthony, that you do.
Very superstitious, but yeah.
Okay. And that's fine too. It could be superstitious, but I do a vocal warm up. I do a thing where I kind of feel more grounded and get my feet into the ground more. When you see me work a trade show, I kind of move in a certain way. I want to kind of move sharply and a little more dynamically because it's kind of like, what's this guy up to? Kind of, you want people kind of on guard, to be ready. So you might find some different things. I even have, I have one right here, but a little scent inhaler that I would anchor my high performance state to. So if anyone's curious, I'll run this real quick, is that when you are on fire, you just came off stage, you're like, oh man, I killed it. You're in that state. You smell that smell, and it can be whatever. Mine's some sort of relaxing smell or whatever, but it could be these inhalers that there's one called, I think there's called Boom or something like that, but you can look up these things and it looks like a little chapstick, right? Next time you're on fire again, smell it again. If you can do it 2 or 3 times, we're trying to attach that smell. We're anchoring that smell to that state. And now to this day, if I smell that thing before I go on a virtual call, go on stage, I feel like a steel rod goes down the back of my, I feel like a tank, and I have this kind of like, let me at them. Kind of like, give me the crowd. I want the crowd. Like, you know what I mean? It just puts me in that place. And so funny. I'm talking about this. I'm thinking about smelling an Anthony, and I can feel it right now. Okay.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, so how do we get those resourceful states when we want them? Right. So that's something for people to explore and to look at.
No, I love that. I think, yeah, it's a bit different to me just wearing my specific color underwear and for good luck on stage. But no, it's which I do by the way. But that's just me. But no, I think to your point about that feeling and trying to lock in, like and I think everyone who speaks in public and tries to engage with other people, even if it's not, we're not just talking about crowd speaking. We're talking about if you're giving a presentation to a board or you're giving a tech talk to try and convince someone to buy your product, like let's ground it back in the technical sense. When you're just killing it. When you're on fire, because I think I know that I do in my head as I'm talking and still delivering. In my head, I'm going, dude, you're on, like you're crushed, like this is going, like you've got this, like don't worry about it. You are here in the moment. So, and that's the greatest feeling, to know that you're just purring and your engines are just firing, right? So, yeah, that's really cool. And then coming off the stage or finishing, there's no better feeling than nailing it as well. So, what you're trying to say is try and trap that state, so you can get there just by working yourself into it, as opposed to working into it without, just cold effectively. Like, don't start cold is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. That's a cool little tidbit. All right, let's finish off with just a little, maybe a couple of future trends. Like we talked about, where you're going, like in terms of infotainment, boothing. Where do you see it in 5 or 10 years? Like, obviously, you talked about AI. Well, we haven't got too much time to say about how that might impact it, but you've already talked about the fact that you feel like being human is definitely better.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
Where's the next 5 or 10 years going in this space?
Good question. I mean, definitely, events are finally embracing more data. And so what we're seeing that way, and in fact, we have a new partner that we're using, and we call it crowd metrics, where we put sensors in the booth, and it works off of cell phone signatures. So it actually can see, how many people are walking around, how many people get within 50 feet, then they get in the booth. What is the dwell time? What is their journey through the booth in terms of different areas that they visit? And being able to kind of just glean off of that, right? Like, so what was the best point of entry? Where, what was working, what wasn't? How does this compare to the overall, show? So there's some interesting things. So we're always coming in and saying, hey, we're going to be this undeniable draw. We're going to be this magnet. Okay. How do we measure the effectiveness? Because we like it because it shows that we're working. But I mean, it's apparent because you can see the crowds, right? And then the other side is, let's make sure that once those people are there, that we have meaningful interactions, right? So it's like bringing the right people, training them up. And if you don't have the right people, you're not going to train, hire some specialists, right? And we have people that we supply. And then making sure you deliver a memorable message, right, around that. So making sure that you're saying the right things, you've made it engaging in terms of the simplification of it, and then also making sure you deliver it well. So in terms of the future, I think just data on execution is going to be big.
That's very Dark Knight. If I'm picturing that Dark Knight scene, the Batman scene where they're using the cell phones to get the 3D image of the environment built up. That's kind of the tech that you're talking about there. That's freaky. I love it though. I'll pay attention next time I'm at these shows to see if I can do that. That's quite cool. Somewhat scary, but cool. Okay, finishing off, like less than a minute. You've got a book coming out. So talk about the book in about 10, 20 seconds, just to tell them what's happening, what it's about, and hopefully we can link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. So it doesn't come until October, but it's called Engage First, Capture Attention to Tell, Sell, and Sway. And so it's really about the fact that no one cares what you know. Like, we're talking about tech, everyone's smart people. You have to engage first before you're able to convey that information. So it's really apropos to this.
Good stuff. Hey, Anders, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for being on Great Things with Great Tech. This has been a very engaging conversation. I got that pun in. Excellent.
All right. Thanks for having me, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Good stuff. Hey, just as a reminder, thanks for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to highlight companies and technologies shaping our world. Don't forget to follow us on social media at GTwGT Podcast and visit GTwGT.com for more great content and all past episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Please spread the word, and if you feel like it, drop a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.